If you find yourself with a camera in your hand and you want to learn how to use it, please subscribe to this channel, like the videos, comment down below what you would like to learn more about. Hi Photos photographers. Today we're talking about better composition. How do we get better composition in our photographs? I'm going to have 3 tips for you today. Number 1 is camera placement. We talk about this all the time. We've talked about it before in composition, but camera placement is important. If we get tied into one thing just continuously, it gets monotonous and dull. So sometimes we just need a little bit of change. Tip number 2 is light quality, and we're going to get more into that. We've discussed it some here and there, but really there's an interesting pattern within photography. There's a set of 3s that kind of carries on all the way around photography. I mean, we have the sensor, the aperture, and the shutter speed. We have, in composition, we have camera placement, the photographer's perspective, and lighting. It's just interesting how many things in photography, and even one topic within photography, has 3 parts that you need to kind of work together and detail all that together. But point number 2 in light quality is, if you don't have a good enough quality light, then your composition is going to kind of fall flat. There needs to be a good quality of light for the composition really to come off. Even in what we were discussing of high contrast, low contrast photographs, there still needs to be enough light to give the subject or object some kind of detailed definition. So point number 3, bring that finger down. Point number 3, we need to have something to cause us to do something different, right? So change your lens. Change your lens, because the lens has a bearing on what the camera sees, right? So camera placement is one. If I were to change my camera's perspective I'm videoing with right now, it would create a different view of the background. It would give a different view of me as well. So both would change at the same time. It's not even in one of the previous videos we did of composition, where we talked about the golden ratio and the rule of thirds and all those details about composition. If I were to change perspective, you would get a different view of the background and me. Okay? So it's not just your subject placement, it's not just your camera placement, it's not just a different angle from the same place the camera is, it's actually a change of perspective. When someone says to change the way you're thinking, to change your perspective on something that you think about, that would be the same kind of idea, but this practically fits into the quote real world applicably. So now that I wasted 15 seconds on applicability, the method in which we change perspective is the reason I suggest those 3 Ps in the composition videos previously in our playlist. Is the perspective we have is not just camera placement, but the camera, even in its place, can take a different perspective, right? So taking a perspective means that the photographer actually needs to obviously bring the camera back into what he's seeing or she's seeing, and get the camera to a place where it's seeing what they see. If that is going to make sense in this idea of perspective, the camera needs to see what the photographer sees to really achieve the idea and the look and the feel of what the photographer wants to achieve in that shot. So that's the reason for perspective. The camera needs to assume the position, the place, and the viewing angle of the photographer, and that's going to change with your lens. So your lens is going to change your viewing angle. It's going to have a wider view, a more narrow view. It's going to look at the same object from a greater distance if it's a zoom lens. So lenses are very important. So very quickly, let's go over these 3 again. Your camera placement, change your camera placement a little bit. Even if it's the same camera placement, the view of the background is going to change. Even if I'm in the same place within the camera frame, the perspective of the background is going to change. If I change in the camera frame and the background changes, then usually it's a perspective thing, that the camera has changed but it has a different take on seeing that subject or object. So that is camera placement. Light quality. Light quality we kind of brushed over real quick, but if you have two lights, let's say both are diffused, then change one light position to a different place and add a harsh light, or turn one of the diffused lights off. That's going to change the quality too. It's going to take, if they're both lighting the subject or the object the same amount, then it's going to take your light quality about 50%. But light quality doesn't just have to be how harsh the light is. It can be diffused, it can be adding light, it can be taking light away. If you're shooting with lights that'll change their white balance, you could change the color, whether cool or warmth of the light, but I wouldn't suggest doing that necessarily. I would do more of the color change with your camera in a custom white balance. But that would be light quality. Add light, take away light, change the light in one way or another. I mean, obviously you can see here, my hands have one light quality. Let's use this illustration. I have one light quality because of the light coming from the window over here and the light from the reflector down there. But if I move my hands just 4 inches forward, boom, now there's new light quality there, right? Because I'm getting direct sun through the window and I'm not getting the shade from back here. So that's a different light quality altogether, and that's in a very short space of the studio here where I'm videoing. So that's a very quick illustration of visual of light quality. And last but certainly not least, changing your lens. If you're shooting from something more wide angle, 12 to 24 millimeter lens, and you change it to a 35, that's going to be a small change, but it's still 11 millimeters. If you're shooting a 24 millimeter viewing through that 12 millimeter zoom, and you see the view of what 24 millimeters does, and you change that to a 35 millimeter, that's taking about half of what you currently are shooting with 24 and adding it on again. So it's going to limit how wide a view you have. Now, it's not going to cut it in half, but it's going to certainly limit what you do see with the 24 millimeter lens versus what the 35 millimeter sees. And it's going to limit it even more if you change it to a 70 or 75 millimeter, 85 millimeter. So I hope that gives you an idea of how the lens could force you to change camera perspective and placement, as well as that lens is going to have a different light quality receptive profile to it, so it's going to need your light quality to change as well. So it's going to force you naturally, changing one, to change the other two things all within it. So as we discussed, the quality of threes are very interesting, intriguing to me, and it's very important to mess with each one and to critique it to make it the optimal item of what you need for your shot. So thank you so much for watching. If this video has added any value to your shooting, we thank you for watching this content, and we would appreciate your thumbs up on that video. If you want to see something more, you want to go in depth, write your question down in the comments below. But if you're not yet a subscriber, we would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much, and God bless.